Welcome to the Teacher Thoughts Podcast. I'm your host, Abby Hernandez. Teacher thoughts can be groundbreaking. Teacher thoughts can be tiring. And the good news is, teacher thoughts can be changed. I don't claim to be a mental health expert. I'm just an educator, and I'll be using this space to synthesize what I have learned from my self-help research in a way that will help you. This is episode 1. I am so glad you are here. I'd like to start off today by asking you a few questions. You don't have to pause the podcast to come up with an answer. I just want you to notice and be aware of the thoughts that come to your mind automatically. Tune in to your knee-jerk response. Here it goes. What words would come to your mind if someone asked you, what is it like to be a teacher? Or let's phrase it in a different way. How does it feel to be a teacher? As you think of what you would say, I want you to notice your body. Do you feel relaxed? Tense? How are you physically responding to these questions? If you're like me, or my historic self, you probably would say it's overwhelming, stressful, or exhausting. Your body probably immediately tenses up a little bit, and you might feel tight in your chest or shoulders. You may even pause for a quick second and wonder, would I even tell the truth? Your truth. Would it depend on who was asking you the question? Like, if a kid asks you that, obviously, you're probably going to say something different than if another adult who's maybe wanting to go into the profession asks you that, right? So then after you decide if you're going to tell the truth or not, if you do tell the truth, you may consider mentioning happiness or how it's worth it or rewarding. Most teachers I know would mention these probably, but usually as secondary thoughts. Usually those would come after the tsunami of stress that wells up inside them, right? So everyone is feeling so overwhelmed that that's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about teaching. Like, not enough time, right? So for now, I'd like you to take this answer, what you would say, honestly, put it in your pocket for a few minutes, and we'll come back to this later in the podcast. For now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself to you before we get to the good stuff. So I'll try to make this quick. Like I said in the intro, I'm Abby Hernandez. I'm an elementary school teacher in Georgia. And up until this 28th year of my life, I have been 100% an all or nothing thinker. Before I had kids, this helped me in my teacher duties because I was all in. I was the person the janitors had to kick out so I wouldn't trip the alarm. I'd show up in the dark in the morning, I'd leave in the dark in the afternoon, last car in the parking lot, and then I'd eat dinner and then I'd get back on my laptop to work. Even though this felt exhausting and like I was never done and like I had no idea what I was doing, I was producing so much good stuff and taking on so many additional roles. I felt like I was on a fast track. I don't know to where, but somewhere, right? And I was feeding off of any recognition I would get, and it would just fuel me up, and I would keep going, and I was working really hard. I just kept wanting to do more. Then I had my son, who is now 3, and everything changed. So one of the extra things that I had been doing was a position training other teachers on one of our district's initiatives. And when our administrators found out that I was going on maternity leave, they asked someone else to fill in that position. Not like for the duration of my maternity leave, but permanently. And I found this out from the amazing woman who was replacing me. But can I say awkward? Like, I didn't even know how to feel or how to respond to that happening. So around that same time period, some other things were going on. I heard some other people say that because of being a mom, they didn't feel like they were in a life stage where they could take on leadership roles. I had some other friends who were moms and made it a priority to leave by 3 o'clock to be home with their kids. And all of these things, plus the fact that I was super maternal, like always wanted to be a mom. And since I'm an all or nothing person, right? Like wanted to be an all-in mom. All of this led me into what I sort of consider my nothing phase of teaching. So while I was still providing for my students, all of the extra things that I was doing went by the wayside, and I felt like I was a fraud. Like I was just waiting for someone to figure me out, find out that I wasn't doing the 100 things that I was supposed to be doing all the time, every single day. And I felt like no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep up. No matter if I would stay up after the kids went to sleep, no matter what I did, I was just woefully behind all the time. So when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, I went through sort of an identity crisis. I'm like, do I even want to be a teacher anymore? I mean, obviously, according to my brain, I would never be able to live up to my previous level of performance. So, I mean, what do? Did I want to sacrifice the time with my kids? Did I want to take all of my overwhelm and my stress into my home? For me, the answer was no. So I spoke with my husband and decided to stay home when my daughter was born. I said I was staying home for a year, but honestly, at that point, I wasn't sure if I would ever go back. So I can't believe I just said that out loud. Whew, I just kind of got chills because I don't know who's going to listen to this. But anyway, okay. So truth. I'm sharing my truth with you. Okay. So after my daughter was born, I was diagnosed with PPD and ADHD. So postpartum depression, and I think you all know what ADHD is. If you're an elementary teacher, like obviously, yes. But as if we need any more acronyms, right? Okay. And so my identity crisis, like, am I going to choose between being a bad mom or a bad teacher? That whole thing really just spiraled, like super duper spiraled. And it wasn't fun. For a moment, it was kind of fun, like, ooh, leaving the profession, like my opportunities are endless. But it very quickly became terrifying. Like if I wasn't a teacher anymore, who even was I? Like I have dedicated 5 years to getting my master's and then, 4 more years, or maybe 5, I don't even know, teaching, between student teaching and all of that. Like who would I be? If I wasn't teaching, who would I be? So between my diagnoses and my general confusion about what to do with life, I started researching. I was like, I need to figure out what I need and what I'm going to do next. So I've always been sort of like a self-help nerd. I'm a reading and writing teacher, but I don't read like novels for fun. I read like how to do better, how to feel better, those types of things. So I had always been a self-help nerd, but that kind of went into overdrive. I was seeking solutions everywhere. So I started reading books and reading websites and listening to podcasts. And y'all, the things that I've learned have really been life-changing. Have they completely changed my life already? No. But they have definitely changed my mind. And so being back in the classroom this year, I still see everyone else struggling, not everyone, but lots of people struggling with the same things that I struggle with. And I really think that if you listen to what I've learned and you hang in there with me, it's going to help you too. So, one of the most helpful things, I think probably the most helpful thing, is going to sound kind of crazy. You may not believe it at first, but hang in there. You will believe it. I learned this from my life coaches, Kristen Carter, and her life coach, Brooke Castillo. And so here's the thing. Think back to the question I asked you earlier. If you said teaching is overwhelming or teaching is exhausting, if I followed up that question and said, why? Why do you feel that way? Why is teaching exhausting? You would most likely come up with tons of reasons. Like, it wouldn't take you a long time, a day, to come up with any reason why you felt that way. Like, you probably know. For you, the reason is probably going to be something about time, something about insane expectations. Maybe your students are thrown in there, maybe parents, maybe administration, maybe your team. You're probably going to have tons of reasons, right, why you feel that way. I'd like for you to know and learn something that totally blew my mind. All of those things that you gave as the reasons for your feelings are not what are causing your feelings. Let that sink in for a second. The reasons that you think you were overwhelmed are not why you were overwhelmed. You are overwhelmed not by your circumstances. So all of these things that you mentioned were circumstances. Circumstances don't lead to feelings or emotions. Your thoughts about your circumstances are what lead to those emotions. So let me give you an example. I have an upcoming observation. Most of my team got it before break, but I had to go into quarantine. Thank you, COVID. And didn't get my observation before Christmas break. In my mind, that's stressful, right? That causes me to feel tight in my chest. The observation itself has not happened. The upcoming observation, I feel like or have felt like, is looming over my head. But it's not because I have an observation. It's because of the things that I'm thinking about having that observation that it makes me feel awful. Okay? So I might think something like, it has to be perfect or I'll get fired, right? That's a total exaggeration because how many people do you know have actually been fired? But still, I have to be perfect or it may change my administration's perception of me. Right? My reputation might go down the toilet. My kids might not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, let's be real. My students will most likely, if they're in small group, not 100% of the time be doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Like, we all worry about that. We're supposed to have them working in small group, but do they really work in small group? Sometimes. Okay, maybe my lesson got delayed for some reason, technological glitches, or, a student throwing up, or I just went on a soapbox because they needed to get it together, right? So there are tons and tons of thoughts that I have about that upcoming observation that then cause the stress. But the observation itself is not the thing causing me stress. It's how I am thinking about that observation that is causing me stress. So what does any of this mean? Are even any of those thoughts that I had true? Okay. Am I going to get fired? Do I have to be perfect? It becomes true to me. It is my truth if I believe it. Right? So if I tell myself those things over and over and over, it is absolutely true to me. So we spend so much time ulcerating over things that are outside of our sphere of control instead of taking responsibility and confronting things that are inside our control. So what is the only thing I can control about that observation? Well, I can be prepared, I can make my plans, all of those things. But how can I control the stress that I'm having about it? I have to change, not my circumstance. I can't change the kids in my class. I can't go change my principal, change my team, change my parents, change the pandemic, right? I can't change any of those things. Those are circumstances. They're outside of my control. What can I control? My thoughts. Okay, so I can choose to think, I'm going to rock this observation. I can choose to think, my perception of myself as a teacher is really high. I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do 98% of the time, right? I know that I am making change for these students, and I know that whether I get exceeds or a needs development, I am worthy. I'm just worthy, right? So this doesn't mean that I have to all of a sudden not feel negative emotion, not have negative thoughts, pretend that the world is rainbows and butterflies and be positive Polly and everything is right and I have a perfect, fulfilling profession. No. Okay? Stop. No. I don't think that. I'm not trying to sell you on that. But it does mean that I need to pay attention. If I really don't want to be feeling those negative emotions, I need to pay attention and get to the bottom of what thoughts am I having about my circumstances that are causing those emotions. And if I want to have positive emotions instead, how could I start to acknowledge my automatic negative thoughts, but then consciously choose to shift into a thinking space that serves me? So one of the concepts that I've learned is that most of life, is 50-50, 50% positive, 50% negative. And we are all worthy of our own approval and love, whether we're in that positive space or we're in that negative space. And so we have to accept that our reality is okay, even when it doesn't automatically feel like it. So our reality is okay because whether I get a good observation, whether I get a bad observation, whether my student is doing what they're supposed to do, whether they're not, I am worthy because I'm a human being who loves myself, right? And anything that they can say about my observation isn't going to shake that because I know who I am as a human being, right? And not because of my performance or not because I'm smarter or more creative or more engaging than the person next door or across the hall or down the street, right? But because I am a human being who is just worthy, and you are too, okay? So I just want to take a second to say, I'm not great at this. Like, I haven't even been back to school since I've learned half of what I'm talking about in this podcast, okay? But it is so important and so mind-changing that I felt like you need to know, okay? Before you go back after this holiday break, you need to know. And if you're listening to this at another time, whatever time of the school year it is, you needed to know, okay? Your circumstances as a teacher that are out of your control are not what are making you feel bad. If you feel bad. If you don't, amazing. I'm so happy for you, okay? You should have told us all sooner, your secret sauce, okay? But if you are feeling negative, it helps. How are we going to solve the problem if we don't know what the problem is? Okay, you have control over your thoughts. So start paying more attention to those so that you can find a way to change them into something that serves you. All right? I really hope you'll take the time to think about what this means for you, for your life as a teacher, for your thoughts as a teacher. This has been your first episode of Teacher Thoughts. Join me next week for an episode about feedback. Thank you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.